Hello, welcome to another peerScholar video. It's Steve Jordan's again. This video is actually aimed for both students and teachers, and really the idea here is to express the pedagogy that's gone into peerScholar and along the way some of the research as well. I do want to start off by pointing out that you can go to www.peerscholar.com if you want to actually get some of the research papers and more specific details about the research. I'll be referring to things more generally in this video. But what I really want to do is focus on the basic process of peerScholar, which of course involves students first creating some assignment, then assessing the work of their peers, then getting feedback from their peers, and quite potentially revising their work in light of that. So I want to talk about the pedagogy behind those steps in a little bit of detail. So literally what I'm going to do is go into each step, and let's start with the create phase, and just talk about some of the aspects that makes peerScholar unique. Now, with respect to the create phase, to some extent, this isn't necessarily all that different from any essay a faculty member might have given their students to perform. Although quite often I think when we did that in the traditional essay, we tended to think more, go find out what you can about genetic factors of schizophrenia or something. We tended to define the topic pretty precisely. And one of the nice things about peerScholar assignments is that you can very much go the other direction. That is, you can give students very open-ended assignments. In fact, the best assignments, I think, do one of two things, or both if you can pull it off. One is to push students to think critically, and that often, one of the best ways to do that is to ask them to create an argument, an efficient argument that reflects their perspective on some issue. So a very personal attempt at critical thinking and expressing one's position well. The other option, of course, is to push students to become very creative and to think of some, very unique and novel approach to some situation or problem. If you can do both of those things, fantastic. But those are the kinds of things that peerScholar assignments really allow you to do, is to really push students to think in open-ended ways. And the whole assessment process that's built within works with that quite well, and in fact it benefits from it. For example, if students eventually are going to assess the work of other students, it's kind of neat if they're being exposed to other arguments, arguments, for example, other than their own perspective. That really engages the critical thought process even better. So, to the extent there's a unique part of this first phase, that's it, is that you can really embrace these open-ended assignments. But of course, the real pedagogy comes in the next two phases. In the second phase, what we've really embraced here is the notion of peer assessment, and also throughout self-assessment. But let's look at peer assessment, and let's look at specifically in the situation where students are seeing the work of their peers, some subset of their peers, and being asked to assess that work, both in terms of sort of global overall comments, but also maybe in terms of these inline comments as well. We've known for a long time that the traditional system really isn't that good when a student produces work and then never sees the work of any of their peers. Simply by seeing the work of their peers, they're getting a much better sense of where their work fits and how good their work is. And we're trying to enhance that in peerScholar by literally having their work accessible all the time. It also embodies this notion of what's sometimes called constructivist learning, that students, it's one thing to tell students what makes, for example, a good argument, but it's much more powerful if they're actually exposed to a number of arguments, some of which are better than others, and they themselves think about it and try to figure out, well, why is that argument better than this argument, and what are the components that are making an argument especially powerful. So by seeing the work of their peers, they're getting access to that, and there's been research for, well, decades really, showing that peer assessment of this sort is very powerful. But of course, it's always been logistically problematic to hand papers around and get the papers back. Has been difficult. peerScholar does all that for you. And in addition, of course, peerScholar allows this all to happen with anonymity. Students are just evaluating the work of their peers without any idea of who did which assignment. And that allows them to be much more well, for lack of a better word, clinical, much more, blunt, but of course, obviously, still respectful. We want the whole code of conduct, but it allows them to really focus on the work and comment on the work, and that's very powerful. So, and of course, if you also have a good rubric at play in the same time, then you're guiding students and giving them some sort of scaffolding to help them deal with this novel task of assessing the work of their peers. Now, there's also a third aspect, of course. We are, in a sense, asking students to become the teachers. And that alone is both empowering and also very informing. It gives them a sense of how difficult it can be to assess something and all the components at play. Yeah, and throughout, professors will always have the option of asking students to self-assess. The idea behind that is just to take whatever they've learned when thinking about their peers' work and now bring it back on their own work. Okay, so the self-assessment really just provides an explicit push for that. And there's a lot of research as well to show that self-assessment is very powerful. In the third phase, of course, when they log in, they now see the comments that their peers gave to their work. There's a number of things that's nice about this, especially if it's stressed well to students. And one of them is this whole notion that, some of the feedback you're going to get through life is really valuable, some of it not so much. And a really important task involves trying to figure out what's good and what's bad. It's another example of what we call quality-based discrimination, pushing students to realize that things vary on a quality continuum, and to get them to really kind of focus in and say, how good is this? In this case, how good is this feedback? Will it actually make my work better? And so we ask them explicitly to rate that feedback, to kind of explicitly give that sense of how useful or not they found the feedback. And also, again, they're always doing this with their assignment visible all the time. So they can always reflect back on themselves as they go through. So again, really a lot of thought process going into this, and a very personal thought process, because this is all about their work. And how their work can be better. And they're seeing different perspectives. To the extent these different perspectives converge, that's giving them a nice strong signal. To the extent they don't, now they're getting a nice variety of comments to think about. So that's all good. Now, of course, once they see and think about all that, there is the whole process of revising their work, which is called formative assessment often. And there's been a lot of research to show that this is one of the best learning experiences a student can have, to submit something draft and then to get comments and then to attempt to improve it on the basis of those comments. Really encourages a lot of deep thought processes going on. And you can, these last two are again just meant to really put some punctuation on that. So you can specifically ask students to reflect on the whole process they went through, to really encourage more of that metacognitive development, and you can ask them to self-assess. When you do that in the third phase, of course, they're assessing both their original assignment as well as their revised assignment. So this is getting them really to key in on the changes they made and how those changes improve their work. Okay, all of this is focusing on their very deep cognitive skills and giving them practice. And that's the philosophy behind peerScholar, is that cognitive skills are just like physical skills. If we want someone to learn karate, they have to engage in it, and they have to do it over and over. And if we give them effective practice and consistent practice, these skills will become automatic, they'll become natural. And so all throughout the peerScholar assignment, that's the goal, to exercise these high-level cognitive skills. And hopefully, this little demonstration has given you a sense of how peerScholar accomplishes that goal. Cool. Have a great day.